What's up, fellas? My illustrious female fans, Stevealicious here. It's October 1995. You have 180 US dollars burning a hole in your pocket. You love your Sega Genesis, and you have absolutely no regard for the lives of AA batteries. This is your device. Okay, so before we start the video, if you're new here, if you're not new here, if you like the content, go ahead and tussle that subscribe button. It certainly helps out the channel. And it ensures that I can keep bringing content like this. Now, I don't know if that's a threat or a promise. You guys can decide. But the Sega Genesis Nomad. Now, I'm going to do that. That's a prerequisite of these videos, right? You got to do the once around. Got to do the ports. Is it a tech video if you don't show the ports on the device? A retro gaming device video? But we're going to talk about a couple different things. I'm not going to kill it, because I don't think it's the fault of the device itself or what they were planning to do. It's just a weird... We're gonna boot up Sonic here. But first we'll do the ports, right? All right, so let's take a look here. We've got your game port, your AV port, which I think uses the Sega Genesis Model 2 AV cords, which is really cool as we refocus that. You got your DC in, which also uses the Genesis Model 2 power button. D-pad, quite nice D-pad, which is something that you often got on first-party devices that you did not later get on third-party devices. 6 buttons, because at that time, in 1995, enough Genesis games used them, so they put them on. Mode and start. Your controller port for a second controller. If you had a friend, mostly that's for the AV. You're not going to be playing it on the screen. You have your friend over. You can put it on the television. You can play two-player, which is nice. Your brightness knob, which basically was two spectrums that you went along with this slider. With the dial. You went from various degrees of unviewable to various degrees of unplayable, but we'll get to that in a second. You have your headphone jack and your volume port. So let's boot up Sonic. And we can kind of show you what the deal is. I'm going to turn the volume down here, because you've all heard it. You know it by memory. So that's not too bad there. Let's see if we can get... Yeah, there we go. So let's talk about 90s screen technology as I try to play Sonic through a viewfinder on a camera, which is incredibly difficult. It actually shows up a bit better on camera than it does in person. It's not... Look, for passive matrix displays, if you know about them, it's not horrible. But a game like Sonic, you're playing on a passive matrix display. What's the biggest problem if you had one as a child, or you had one as a kid, or even you have devices with them now? Ghosting. Right? And so I know that the NEC, the TurboGrafx device, came out a few years before and had a very nice display, but those were 8-bit games. Right? This is the burst processing of the Sega Genesis and faster games. Now, if it's playable, right? But you're going to have to put up with some... It looks a little... for those exact jumps on platformers it's different, right? There's that ghosting. Because the line, each individual pixel is not powered. The power and the lighting is coming from the sides of the screen. And I want to talk about 90s display technology, because I think the late 80s and the early 90s were a very interesting time. We had quite the jump. If you go from 2000 displays to today, are there improvements? Yes, 2K, 4K, 8K now, all the rest of it. But the jump from what we had in the early and late 80s to just through the 90s to 2000 was an incredible jump. If you have an old ThinkPad that will probably make its way onto the channel at some point, the display there, you could use that today. Some of the the PowerBooks from the late 90s, the Macs, you could use those displays perfectly usable today. Some of the passive matrix ones, though, you would throw through a window. Very upsetting. Now, it keeps costs down, because in 1995, active matrix display is still pretty expensive, as we just completely freeze it. That's another thing we'll get to in a second. Active matrix displays, difficult, expensive. So, and you're talking about for the passive matrix one, you're talking about the battery life of 2 hours, right? And we can see what we just did there, by the way. This battery pack, extremely sensitive. So, the main deficiency for people was the screen. Not the best screen in the world. Had to keep cost down. You were already at $180. So we're not talking about a cheap device. I think in today's dollars, that came out to like $350, possibly more. So you're not talking about a cheap device. You want to keep costs down. You wanted to keep battery life not insane. It was already pretty nuts, but you didn't want it to go insane. So I can't blame them for the choice, but it did make it a difficult device to use over a long period of time. And listen, but you can't... We use the Game Gear, right? Different system, different speeds. So the Game Gear screen was not great, but those were Sega Master System games. So you're not dealing with the same speed and the same quality that you'd expect out of a Game Gear game that you'd want out of a full-on Sega Genesis game. Now, the battery pack. Yep. There's 6 bad boys, 6 AA's in here, and they last a whole 2 hours. And if I don't know, listen, the batteries aren't cheap now, but they certainly weren't cheap 25 years ago. So this was like running a car that you need to put gas into. It was an expense. So you could have invested a bit more into the nickel metal hydride rechargeable battery pack, but they didn't anchor particularly well. So like what just happened in that game, we kind of kicked off the battery and we lost power because you lose connection. That's all it takes, right? Let's do that again. That's all it takes, a little shuffle, and then the thing's off. It doesn't anchor particularly well. So, but it's heavy with this on. The rechargeable battery was the way to go, but then you're looking at the $250-ish price range all in with tax. Now, we're talking October 95, right? What came out around then? PlayStation, right? So for $299, you could have gotten yourself a PlayStation, been set for the next 5 years, or you're really married to your Genesis. And what's the purpose of a device like this? At the time, the media said, well, it's to people who want to take their Genesis on the go. You're waiting for a train. You're on a car ride. Oh, okay. But most mobile games were designed to be quick play. These games, I mean, I brought out Star Trek here because I want to show you something. A game like this, okay? So you want to play Star Trek. So you've got 20 minutes. You're waiting for the bus. All right, let's do it now. We got 20 minutes. Okay, so we get out. First of all, you got to carry this in what? Your briefcase, your bag? You need your own saddlebag to carry this thing around, okay? But let's say you do. Then you got to pick what game you want to play before you leave, because you're not going to bring more than 2 of these things around. Or even if you're doing that, how many of these are you going to bring around? So let's say we want to play some Star Trek Next Generation. Who doesn't? Boot it up. But we're in the middle of a game, right? We're not just going to start over. The thing takes 20 minutes. The train will be here before we even get to the first bit of playing. So why don't we enter? Hold on, this was the 90s. Why don't we? Thankfully, the young man that I bought this from, however many years ago, actually had his papers and his codes and stuff like that. And you had to enter. You remember the games with the codes? Forget it. If you had Roger Clemens baseball back in the day, you were basically entering, you had a better chance of cracking the German Enigma code during the war than you did of putting some of these codes in to play these games. So I didn't quite understand the argument that, well, it's so you could do some portable gaming. A lot of these games weren't designed for that. Look, all right, let's get into the story. Communications, we can... And a game like this plays better, by the way, obviously. There's more text, there's less movement. You could play something like this. So you get into the story, you get going. Oh, the train's here. Gotta go. Oh, I gotta turn it off. Start over, Sonic level 1. Wherever you are. I don't think the quick play was certainly the way to go. But let's go back to the cost for a second of a device like this. So they packed a lot of technologically for the time. It was impressive, right? It's hard for companies now to put entire consoles into a package like this. And I understand the Genesis was 6 years old at the time, but it still was a feat, right? But with technology, with advancements, you get cost. $180. Battery pack, you're up to $250, and like I said, PlayStation was $299. So what would the use for this device do I think would be? Well, I mean, you remember as a kid, we'd bring devices over to a friend's house. You'd bring a device to grandma's house. Well, a Sega Genesis Model 2 in 1995 was $80, right? For a new one. I mean, you could have went into Funko Land, huh? Funko Land back in the day? Just an aside, because, the video's not long enough as it is. Do you remember when you could go into Funko Land, and what you do is you get one of the circulars, right? And they'd have all the prices of what they were currently going for and what they were currently trading in for. I used to sit there for hours, and I'd go over what my allowance money would be, and I'd go ahead and circle and actually sit there and do math on what game I'd be able to get and what game. When I went back into FuncoLand, I'd have my whole plan of attack mapped out with that circular, that little newspaper that they have. But anyway, let's say a used one. You went into FuncoLand, 50, 60 bucks. You could literally buy one, leave it at grandma's house, buy another one, leave it at a friend's house, and still be ahead of the game, and have a couple games to boot. So I didn't quite understand the purpose of it, the practicality of it at the time. Certainly not if you're looking at it to bring. And this is not. You're already invested in the Genesis if you're getting this device, right? This isn't baby's first Genesis. This isn't the one that you pick up when you hadn't picked up the Genesis before. This is for pre-existing Genesis owners with a catalog that they'd like to keep playing. Now today it's great, because instead of hooking up finding RF cables and whatever and composite cables and trying to plug them into the back of a television, I can get this and have it where I can just play an hour or two of Sonic, an hour or two Star Trek, and be set to go. So I didn't quite understand that. The screen was an issue. If you had one, let me know below. Wasn't compatible with accessories, right? No Mega Drive, no 32X. No Mega Drive, no Master System converter. No 32X, no Sega CD. Sure, it was practical to bring it to your friend's house, but like I said, just buy another one at that point. Be more practical than this. So I didn't quite get the market for it. Neither did the actual market. Capitalism worked its magic, didn't sell a lot. But still interesting today. And we're going to have a few final thoughts right now. And much like Jerry Springer, we're going to have Stevealicious final thoughts. A little segment that we could add at the end of the video. Now, the implementation of this particular one wasn't the best. Not a commercial success. Maybe it was the technology, the time period, whatever it was. But I do wish the idea of this device persisted to today. I like the idea of playing the original media on a device that was original hardware. And I understand that they're coming out with these mini consoles and the retro consoles, and that's great, and that's fine. You can hook them up to HDMI to your television set, and it's really easy and all that stuff, and that's all well and good. But there's something, especially for collectors, you guys know, something about using the original media that you either had from back in the day, or found online, or found at a garage sale, or found out in the wild, whatever it is. Putting that original media into a device is very satisfying. And I've seen them online, and we have the technology to do it. I just think it's the will to do it. People have made portable GameCubes. Very interesting stuff, and especially the smaller size of the discs. You can even put it on a device like this. People have made portable PS2s. A bit bigger because of the size of the DVD, but still possible. The one that I would like to see is a portable N64. I think if Nintendo came out with that, and listen, you still want to have the ROMs for people to, fine. Put an SD card slot in there. Have ROMs where people can download them, you can buy them, whatever it is, have an online store, but have something that's the original hardware. Some companies that do it, third-party companies do it. This is the Retro Duo Portable that I like. D-pad, not the best. You can play your Super Famicom games, and also there's an adapter. You can play Famicom and NES games on it as well. It does the job. But instead of just a procession of the mini consoles and the At Games one, which especially if you guys have used the At Games one, especially for the Genesis, not good, right? The sound just isn't there. So instead of a procession of those type consoles, maybe, just maybe, we could get portable versions of them because the technology's there. The price wouldn't be too bad. Just are they willing to do it? If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time. Have that Stevealicious day. And for those of you in the peanut gallery, Kirby is wearing a Santa hat. But then again, if you're Kirby, every day is Christmas. Why are you still watching? The video ended like 30 seconds ago. You're getting those little suggestions for the other videos right now. I don't know what YouTube is suggesting for you, but don't worry about it. They're all excellent choices. See you later.